I like a large caramel macchiato with an extra shot and whipped cream, please.
Come again?
Wait, hold on. How much is that?
$4.85.
Okay, better drop the extra shot. What does that make it?
$4.20.
Better make it a small. What does that make it?
$3.30.
Better drop the whipped cream. What does that make it?
Less calories.
Oh my God, and he flew all the way to New York to tell me that. That's so romantic.
It's beautiful, really.
You're not even allowed to leave the state.
What's that now?
It's the Al Travis Show. We love having our next guest on. She's Representative Kelly Fenton, and I owe her a big thank you as I called last evening as our regular scheduled guest, Mr. Binge, says, "Oh, I can't make it, by the way, Al. You had a thing come up." Representative, thank you very much for coming on the program. I do appreciate it.
Absolutely. Always a pleasure to be here.
Lots going on, but it seems the same thing. I literally got a very large, angry little email, text, one of those, I don't care, about the idea that I keep talking about the fraud. When all this other, they went flying off the handle on Donald Trump and yada, yada. But I'm sitting here talking about fraud in Minnesota. First off, it's a Minnesota radio show. We'll talk that stuff first before we talk about any of the rest. We'll talk the others at another time. But I think folks are getting to the point that when we talk about the fraud, people are tuning out. Oh, I heard that already. This latest one, Representative, is driving me battier than most, and it's not the biggest number. It's only $20 million. Who would ever say it's only $20 million until we've went through what we went through? But basically what had happened, the Minnesota government wants to give a lot of money to NGOs, right? Nonprofits that pretend that, no, we're going to do great. And some do. I'm not ripping it. But many of them they weren't even registered as nonprofits. They didn't even have a FIN number. They didn't have a social security. They literally just, I'm Al's Pro-Human Fund. And we just sent them a check, $20 million worth. And Representative, how can that possibly be? How can it be that easy now?
First of all, one word comes to mind, and with the heads of the agencies who are giving this money out, and that is negligence. They are not doing their job. Nobody who is not, if you're an NGO not registered with the state of Minnesota, you should not ever be receiving money because you're not compliant to begin with. But here's the deal. It is a very, very simple check to see if you are registered and official or not. And someone is not doing their job in these agencies.
Well, isn't there an application process? I'm Al's Pro-Human Fund. I use Pro-Human Fund because I think that's what George Costanza made up in Seinfeld. So I'm the Human Fund. I want to get money from the state of Minnesota. Do I not have to fill a piece of paper out, online something that says, I'm Al Travis, I run the Pro-Human Fund, here's my business number with the state of Minnesota, here's my nonprofit number with the state. Don't I have to fill that out, address and location, where you can, and they never did that?
I mean, there are policies in place in terms of the application process, regardless of what it is, whether it's filing for candidacy, but we see people have lied about their residency on those applications. So the agencies are being very negligent and not verifying information on applications, but clearly the state legislature needs to put serious parameters in place when it involves money, our tax dollars, going to these nonprofits, going to these entities like Feeding the Future. Due diligence needs to happen, and that's not happening.
See, and again, why this bothers me more than most is this, as I understand it, isn't even someone deceiving the folks at the Department of whatever was sending this check out. They didn't write down a fake number that I just didn't check. They didn't apply. They didn't have I'm a nonprofit thing with the state of Minnesota. So literally was just setting in, hey, I'm Al. I'm the guy. Okay, fine. Here's your check. How do we not have the second checks and balance on this? And what I mean by that, doesn't either the auditor or Secretary Simon, look at the businesses we did business with in Minnesota and their numbers and who wrote checks, and do they not, isn't there a computer program that just matches them up and said, wait a minute, here's 25 of them that don't exist. How can
you would think, as it is Secretary Simon's job, it is the job of the Secretary of State. That's where you go through to file your business, right? So,
Yeah.
but but the state auditor should be auditing corporate these. I would say start with the nonprofits as well. That's not happening either. And so I don't know that anybody in the administrations are doing their job at this point. I mean, look, we're, last time I think we talked, we were at 2 billion plus in fraud, and the projections are far, far, far deeper than that now. And so there is a serious systemic issue happening within our agencies. And I do think it's time. We need to pass some legislation to hold the agency leads accountable as well, along with the people committing this fraud. We need to have serious parameters in place to prevent this from happening. And that's not happening. We haven't seen any action since the Feeding Our Future thing started coming out. There haven't been parameters put in place to prevent it. Instead, the governor champions himself for prosecutions are happening. Well, you can't get this money back. Once that money leaves and leaves the state, leaves the country within this fraud, we can't get it back. It's much, much harder to get it back.
And as far as the prosecution goes, as far as I can tell, about 99% of this is all being found from the U.S., not a Minnesota AG. This is all coming from U.S. attorneys and that sort of thing. But let me ask you this. This is, again, I want everybody. I want accountability with everybody, because here's my point. I had a very good year a couple of years back, right? The accountant does my accounting, and he goes, hey, I had a very good year. You know what? You might get red flagged. What do you mean? Well, because it's a percentage. Your business goes along, humming along, and then all of a sudden you have a peak. They might take a look at you, and I said, well, we're not cheating our taxes, right? Nope. Okay, then I don't really care because I'm doing it the way it's supposed to be done. Some gal with the autism fraud doesn't have a business, and in 2 years makes $14 million only from the Department of Human Resources. How does that not get fragged with the Minnesota IRS, Department of Revenue? How in the world does someone say, this went up 14 million times what she made her first year, and we don't look at it? There are so many organizations that should have red flagged all of this deception, and none of them did.
You're absolutely right. And the citizens of Minnesota paying their taxes on a regular basis should be furious, because people are not being held accountable, but they're not even checking. They're getting an app. Oh, this looks good. It's almost like there must be a playbook out there for committing fraud or something. And then you must, if you look like the right person, then you must be on a list like do not touch, just send money. I have no idea. It is infuriating, though, because this is our hard-earned tax dollars. And imagine, look at the entities in need. School districts are short money because of unfunded mandates. We've harmed through all of this fraud veterans, our most autism, our most vulnerable. And now they're going to be denied services because we don't have money. We've got a deficit going into the next budgets. We're not going to have money for the services.
Where do you think this tips? And here's my point. I guess if I had an autistic child or someone in my family with autism, I would be madder than a hornet that you took all this money. It was going to be $3 million. It got to 200 and evidently didn't go to anybody with autism. It was ripped us blind. If you had children and you were experiencing hunger and you saw the Feeding Our Future stuff just go out the window. If you're a veteran, like you say, if I'm in the state of Minnesota, how am I not so furious at what's going on, and that the money that went, again, we Minnesotans seem to want to do the right thing. We give plenty of money, but we're just giving it to people to steal. When do the people get upset enough? Is this the time that Minnesota will flip and say, no, we're done with this craziness. We're going to get back to some fiscal responsibility?
Well, I sure hope that people wake up, but I don't know that point and when certain people flip, other than, look, they're coming into the next legislature after the next election. We have to go back to the budget again. And there are two things. We either need to make cuts in the budget or we're going to have to raise taxes. And I just think people right now, I believe the fraud is now getting more and more attraction. Basically, in the beginning, it wasn't covered as much. And then it got to be so prevalent that now it's gaining more and more traction and people are looking at it more and more and more. But at the same time, people in Minnesota are hurting financially and they're keeping their head down and they're working hard to make ends meet. And I think it's true. Some of them have kind of tuned out because they're working just to, to put food on the table for their family. And that's all they can worry about at the time right now.
We're going to raise a lot of heck on this program if they try to raise taxes. And here's what I mean by that. If you cut the waste, fraud, and abuse out, the over $2 billion that we already know about, and that's just the crazies. That's a gal going from 0 to $14 million in scamming us. How many little buckaroos are out there stealing 100,000, 10,000, 250,000 that didn't make the mark for the U.S. attorney to come in here? If you add it all up, how about we stop that and spend that money on our kids, spend that money on the autism? You know what? You'd have more than enough money to go around. We just got to stop giving it away.
Well, and when you go back to 2019, let's say the housing fraud issue, that was in 2019, it was about 10 million per year we were spending. And suddenly in today's world, it jumped to 100 million. Okay. But you go back, we have had a net loss of GDP in the state as well. And that means more and more people aren't coming into that system. So that should have been an easy tip off. We were paying 10 million. Now we're paying 100. Like, we need to really look at this because this is a huge jump. But our population in Minnesota and the population with need hasn't grown that much. So I'm going to give a good guess from 2019 to today that that number is going to be about 90 million. That is actually fraud, because I would say it should have been staying at about 10 million when you look at those leaving and coming into the state.
No, see, these are easy math problems. It's just like the autism. Starts at $3 million and within 3 years is at $200 million. How can that possibly be? Does somebody go to the legislature and say, well, we found 200 times more people that we can help? How did you help them? How many have gotten off? Well, they don't really get off. We just keep talking to them. Well, what is the end game here? To spend as much money as possible is the only thing I can see. We got to go to break. I'm running out of time. I've got Representative Kelly Fenton on the program.
If it's your turn to host a game, Grandpa's Barbecue suggests you try something different. Put out the perfect barbecue flavor of Grandpa's Barbecue. Add it to your ribs, dip the meatballs, or drench your wings in the original flavor of Grandpa's Barbecue. It isn't too hot or spicy, fruity or smoky or whatever. Grandpa's Barbecue. Available in select stores and online at grandpasbarbecueshop.com.
Achieving your financial goals requires individual planning and a comprehensive approach. At Midwest Money Management, our mission is to provide you with the knowledge, tools, and confidence to feel comfortable financially today and secure about tomorrow. Learn more at MidwestMoneyManagement.com. That's MidwestMoneyManagement.com.
Securities offered through JW Cole Financial Inc., member FINRA and SIPC. Advisory services offered through JW Cole Advisors Inc., Midwest Money Management, and JW Cole Financial Inc. and JW Cole Advisors Inc. are unaffiliated entities.
You don't need to ask him his opinion more than once. Al Travis on The Al Travis Show.
And we've got a Representative Kelly Fenton on the program with us. Love having her on. Representative, we talked a little bit, of course, about the fraud, and it dumbfounds me that Attorney General Keith Ellison has done very little as far as the prosecutorial portion of this, leaving it up to the Attorney General. In fact, we know that he's had some meetings with some of the Feeding Our Futures people, discussing the problem before all this. And I'm just going to leave it at that. What gets me is in this story, it was yesterday, but it was buried deep, and I find this so hard to believe. According to the Attorney General's office, the state of Minnesota's lawsuit against Fleet Farm for negligently selling firearms to straw purchases is going to continue on in trial. He's suing Fleet Farm, as I understand this now, because they sold a gun to somebody who could legally purchase a gun, but their intent was to give it to a bad guy who couldn't get a gun, the straw purchasing, and that's why we have laws against it. How in God's green earth is Fleet Farm supposed to figure that out, and how is it their fault? It'd be like telling the Chrysler guy, you sold the guy the Chrysler lead and ran into the car with, so the car into the other guy with, so now it's the car seller's fault for selling him the car. How is this something we're going after in Minnesota?
Look, it's really perplexing to me. I did some background. I looked up some things on this case, but I would say from the Attorney General's standpoint, this case is purely political because he needs something to campaign on going into the next election cycle. This is no different from his lawsuit against Kia and Hyundai, right? Mm-hmm. So because their
too easy to steal.
Right? Their cars were too easy to steal. Here is a novel idea. How about we hold criminals accountable? How about that? We continue to blame someone else other than the person pulling the trigger, other than the person stealing the cars. So
that is such a great point. We sit here, and I was okay with increasing the straw man penalties. Because I do think it's wrong. If you can't buy a gun, I get it. You don't go buy one first. I was all for it. Then they pull stuff like this, and you're going to think, I want you to touch any of my Second Amendment rights anymore. It just puts up a wall that shouldn't be there. What did Fleet Farm do wrong?
Well, and look, I mean, they're going after the corporation as a whole. And from what I can tell, first of all, let's back up. Like what you have here working on this case with him is an activist law professor who is known to be a huge activist in gun control. You have this law professor who's working with his students on this case, who the students are like your assistant AGs on the case. You have, when you look at the case, the people they're going after, well, Fleet Farm they're going after, right? But the people who were purchasing these apparently must have been going to different Fleet Farms. Okay. All right. That's how can you track that? I mean, I think something that's going to come out here is that their own laws don't work.
Yeah.
But look, holding the corporation accountable, I think it's
a scare tactic, right? If we can win against Fleet Farm, how's the little gun guy? How's these other guys they're just going to stop selling guns. We can't keep ourselves from being lawsuited out of business. They're just trying to scare people.
I mean, but look, you have the other big gun retailers in Minnesota, like Cabela's, Bass Pro Shops. You have all of them too. So they're going after the corporation. This is no different than going after Kia, Hyundai. I do believe it's a political stunt. So he has something to tout about going into the next election cycle. If you really want to get serious about safety of individuals, let's start by holding the criminals and those pulling the triggers accountable.
Representative Fenton, I just love having you on the program. You were so fine to come in and jump in and do this for me today. Thank you for being here. Really do appreciate you. I seriously, you bet. We'll get her back on again. She's Representative Kelly Fenton.